You asked about Bad Moose Space Cadet and the numbers. Yeah, I don't really know what the figures were, but I just remember that like all that shit was pirated during the Napster era. From what I gather, probably decimated any potential royalties we would have gotten.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was the Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, my old man Lanemeyer has 10 green etched vinyl records left of stories for the big screen over on the iSurrender store. Link in the show notes if you'd like to purchase one before they is gone. Zoinks were a pop-punk band from Reno, Nevada. Born in 93 and died in 98. They had a couple reunion shows in 2005 and 2006. This was a band that was on rotation with my buddies back in high school when we'd be driving around when we got our licenses and be cranking mixtapes and CDs and all that shit. And I believe they were introduced to us by Alan Rappaport from Flipside Records, which is also episode 24 of this podcast if you want to go way back and listen to it. I got Bob's email from Alan and got him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. The Reno scene, how he joined the band, Dr. Strange Records, playing a show with Green Day, having a label of his own, his new band, and a ton more. Lastly, if you're a real estate agent who's looking for some Instagram stickers to help your branding on Instagram and your stories, I make those specifically for realtors. You can check them out by going over to drive80.com, drive80.com, and then click on the Instagram tab in the top right. And it'll give you a landing page with pricing and samples and all that stuff. Or you can just email me at mike@drive80.com and ask me any questions you would like. That's all I got to say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. The reason I reached out to you is I remember you guys from back then, and especially because Alan Popkid introduced me and my friends to you guys. And you said you knew Alan, right?
Refresh me.
He played in a band called True Zero, and he was friends with Jill, the band Jill, and
okay, yeah.
I don't know if he actually did know you, but he worked at a record store in New Jersey called Flipside, and I'm trying to think because I know he went on tour with Jill. Did you guys ever tour with Jill?
I don't know if we toured. I know we definitely played shows with them for sure.
Huh, that's interesting. Okay, so maybe you don't know Alan, but he was called Pop. He has Popkid Records.
I may, and I just forgot.
Yeah, I mean it's been it's been quite a long time. But he introduced me, my friends, to you guys. So my friend, we used to like crank you guys in our car like back in the day, and so I was like, oh my god, I totally have to talk to these guys. And so Alan gave me your information, so that's why we are chatting right now. Before I jump into how the band's, how you got in the scene and everything, do you know that your website's still up?
Yes.
Who runs that?
Me.
You sound excited.
But I haven't done a darn thing with it for, I don't know, years.
Because I was so surprised. I mean, it's like an old school website. It just has like a photo on it with like three guys in like an astronaut's like costumes, and then but your store still works.
Yeah, nobody orders off of it.
Maybe they will now. Because I saw on your Facebook page too. I'm guessing you run that as well.
Yeah, Arnie and I do.
Okay, because you had an April 23rd that the last of our remaining shirts are now available. So you were selling them in this year of April, I can see.
Mm-hmm.
So are these original shirts from back in the 90s or 2000s?
Original designs, but not original shirts. We reprinted them during our reunions back in the mid 2000s, and they've just been sitting in a sort of a storage crate ever since, and I'm trying to get rid of them.
We'll have to put a link to your store, and then when this launches, I'll have to like put a link to it from my Instagram and see if anyone is gonna buy some of this stuff from you guys.
Very cool.
So going back in the beginning of the whole punk thing, what got you involved in the scene?
Oh, that's a great question. I was a metalhead in high school. I played in a metal band, butt rock metal band, but we did a lot of in high school, you're doing like Metallica, Guns N' Roses and crap like that. I had been exposed to punk when MTV first came out, I guess in, I don't know, 81 maybe, 80? I can't even remember the date or the year. So I'd been very familiar with like the Clash and Sex Pistols and things. But when I was in high school, so a number of years later, somebody turned me on to So more punk rock. That's pretty much, the bug that I was bitten by.
What was it that drew you into like punk?
The Clash. A friend in high school sent me let me borrow vinyl, and I'm trying to remember of all the bands, but the one that really stuck with me was 7 Seconds, and the fact that they were also from Reno was really just incredible. So I really just latched onto them very quickly and became a huge 7 Seconds fan.
I definitely say out loud, like I got involved in the scene because in the late '90s because of bands. My friends were into NoFX and the Fat Records thing and Pennywise, and because we'd watch skate videos and 7 Seconds that would be peppered into skate videos. So I've listened to 7 Seconds. I just never really dug into their history before. I had no idea they were from Reno at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's pretty well known.
Yeah, and not only were they from here, but they started, I think, in the late 70s. I want to say 78, 79. So they are like not too far behind the Clash and Sex Pistols and Ramones as far as being a pioneering punk rock band on the West Coast.
I don't think I've talked to any bands that are from Reno because I've talked to a lot of bands. I mean, this podcast started, it was focused on Jersey and then it's expanded outside, but there's a lot of little pockets I always talk about. There's Chicago, Florida, California, Southern California, but I've never talked about the Reno scene. What was that like?
In what years?
I'd say, I don't know. I mean, when you got involved in it, you said how old were you when you started playing in a band or playing local shows?
I would have been in high school. So I think my first shows would have been when I was maybe 14 or 15. Add a few years to that to playing punk rock. I did in high school, so in the mid to late 80s, go to local punk shows in Reno. So I did get to see 7 Seconds a couple times in the late 80s.
Oh, shit.
And also I saw Bad Brains play in Reno.
Oh, wow.
And I think that was what I would call my first ever real punk rock show.
A lot of places around the country had Legion Hall shows, which I'm guessing that you guys played many times in Zoinks.
Yeah, we had a great a Grange Hall and then another hall that I want to say, who played there? Dillinger 4 played another one of those types of halls. So yeah, we did have a few of those, and that's where shows were held, but it was pretty spotty.
So were there more clubs? Because some places just focused on clubs and other places. Jersey was heavily hall shows, firehouses, churches, and things like that. We had a couple big venues, and we had Maxwell's in Hoboken. We have Maxwell's in Hoboken. I think it's gone. And then Starland Ballroom and things like that. But the majority of stuff were Legion Halls. So in Reno, you just had a couple, and then was the rest of it clubs?
Yeah, there was the club scene back then was real spotty. But yeah, when I saw 7 Seconds, I saw them play, I think, two separate clubs over on 4th Street. So one I think was called the Club Underground, which I think now is a stripper bar.
Nice.
And then another club that may still be around under a whole different name or ownership. But yeah, so they came and went pretty quickly. And to do all age shows back in the day was really difficult. So it basically meant a lot of like basement type shows in Reno as well.
So how'd you start playing in bands?
I just started playing drums at an early age. I'd started in school band playing trombone, and as soon as I heard somebody playing the drums, I was like, oh, that's what I need to be doing, not this trombone shit.
Was there like a drummer that you saw on MTV or just in the scene or something that influenced you to want to play drums?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember at an early age who my big drum influences were. And one that's always stuck with me over the years is Stuart Copeland from The Police. I really tried to emulate his style as much as I could and even his sound a bit. But as far as punk drummers, I mean, Troy Mowat from 7 Seconds was incredible. As a youngster, as an adolescent, he was always just incredible to watch and just a powerhouse punk rock drummer. So I don't think he's playing anymore. They had a substitute drummer on their their most recent tours with Circle Jerks, who's also incredible. I don't know his name off the top of my head, but I would say those two for sure were definitely big influence. And then Topper Heaton with the Clash was amazing, or whoever. They switched drummers up a couple times, so I always enjoyed their playing as well.
So I think you said you played in a couple bands or a band before Zoinks. You said earlier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So okay? So were they punk bands or metal bands? What were they?
Both, both. Yeah. In high school, even while I was heavily involved in the metal thing, some friends and I who were playing in a metal band, we did a kind of a one-off cover band of playing like 7 second songs, and I can't even remember what else. Maybe suicidal tendencies and that kind of thing. I had done a few punk rock type things, and then I moved from where I was growing up south of Reno in '89 to San Jose for a year for college, and I hooked up with some folks down there and jammed a little bit, but never really played out. And it wasn't until I moved back to Reno in 1990 that I really started getting like more involved in actually putting on shows and things like that.
So you started doing that in college or after college?
In college.
Were you one of the heads of, not the heads, but one of them, were you a pretty main promoter in Reno at the time for doing shows?
I wouldn't say that. I did a few shows and partnered with other people and, tried to get my own bands booked at local gigs and whatnot. Anything I did, by and large, was pretty underground. It was like basement type things or whatever. I would never call myself a Reno promoter back in the 90s.
Well, how many shows do you think, off the top of your head, did you put on back then?
I couldn't even tell you. Fun fact, though, we did at one point help bring Deftones to the university, before they were huge and famous. So they ended up playing the university for a show that my old band was on. They just crushed it. I mean, they were just incredible, and they were way different sounding back then than they came to be. They came to be more of a kind of a, I don't know how you would describe their music, but like dirgy metal, I guess. And early on, they were faster. They had more kind of like funk stylings. Then they kind of turned into who they were. But yeah, they ended up playing Reno a handful of times before they were really popular. And I think because they played Reno, they became more popular. And I think they even played a frat house party one time and stuff like that. So
Jesus.
So that was one that, my old band worked to book at the university when I was a student there. We did a few shows like that. It was always a mixed thing dealing with the bureaucracy of the university as a student. And I remember one show we played, and this is actually on a old documentary from back in those days, where we played in the student union, and a bunch of the burly security guards who were basically the football players for the UNR Wolfpack, were kind of harassing people because they were moshing or slam dancing or whatever. And we're like grabbing them by the neck to throw them out. And I was just like, what the fuck? I mean, it was just like they had no clue what was going on, that this was not something that was negative. It was just what people did at punk shows, but they didn't understand that. So it became a little bit of a conflict, I guess.
So I guess I was asking the question about the promoting shows because you're getting to see what bands are like when they come through. And it little kind of creeps in my head a little bit that I would think that almost helped mold what you would potentially want to be like in a band when you're showing up to shows, because you might have dealt with some douchebags maybe.
Yeah, it was, we kind of, we had obviously our own like DIY, tried to follow the DIY ethic thing. I was pretty hard line about that in my young, my 20s. But as I got older, I kind of, that isn't nearly as important to me now as it was back then. But yeah, we tried to do a lot of all ages and really, stick with that. But that wasn't always possible in the Reno market. Most of the venues to play were bars. Reno back then was way more restrictive than it is now. I mean, now we have the Holland Project, which is an all-age club. It's been around for, almost 2 decades, I want to say. And it's a nonprofit, and they just do amazing work. And in fact, I was on their board about 10 years ago as well.
That's cool.
So yeah, it's changed a lot. And back then it was just so stifling, conservative, and like, we don't want punk rockers doing anything in this town. And frankly, that was the same thing that 7 Seconds faced back when they were starting out in the late 70s, early 80s. And that continued into the 90s.
So by the time that you guys get around, so when Zoinks starts, what year was that?
93, I think.
So you figure in 93, because that's around the time that Green Day is out, and so it becomes more mainstream. So people are like, oh, what's this punk thing? So I mean, we had it lucky in the mid to late 90s because it was so big that it was it was a lot easier for us to do shows and put on shows and live that lifestyle. But the bands before us are the ones that had to get more, what's the word, more barriers in their way. But when you guys start in 93, did you feel that you had less of a challenge?
Less of a challenge? No, I would say we had a huge challenge trying to, I mean, that was really when we were trying to do those kinds of shows. In fact, Green Day came here and played in, I want to say 91, and they played behind a club on the back of a flatbed truck, trailer type thing. And that was a wild show. I mean, they had just, I don't know if they had broken out by then or they were just about to. I think the date was 91, so it would have been just before I think they got really super huge. But even then, they were crazy popular and people just went nuts for them. But they had to do that show outside, behind what was really a 21 and over club. So that was pretty wild. And then, of course, a year and a half, 2 years later, I joined Zoinks, and it was pretty much the same. We did a lot of shows in basements and illegal type shows. Like that was really common back in the day.
What would be an illegal show?
Like doing it in a basement, where there's, no capacity, no, safe fire exits or anything like that. I mean, it was, in hindsight, it was really, some of what we did was really dumb and dangerous, but it was what we had to do to do the punk rock thing.
So how does Zoink start?
I don't know the answer to that. I was not a original member. My old band had played a show with them, kind of a backyard deal. It was a backyard party during the day on a Saturday or a Sunday. And one of the guys in the other band said, oh, hey, came up to me, said, I play in this band Zoinks and we're looking for a drummer. Would you be interested? And he gave me a cassette tape. I listened to it. At first I was like, oh, I'm not crazy about the name, but I've, most of the bands I've been in haven't had great names. So I went home, listened to the tape, and I was like, oh crap, this is exactly what I want to be doing musically. And so that's what happened is I signed on to them.
How long were they a band before you joined?
Not too long, maybe less than a year or about a year. I want to say maybe they started in 93. I joined in 94.
So they hadn't put out anything out at that point then when you joined?
No, they had recorded the first 7-inch, the Dump Eye 7-inch, and I did not play on that. Once I joined the band, we were able to release it with a local label that really helped us out.
Yeah, so what was Satan's Pimp? That's the label.
That was the local label, yeah. They were friends of ours. Yeah, they were friends of ours, just doing an at-home label.
So then you guys do that, and then how quickly, I don't know, like when you joined the band, because you did a couple bands prior to that and you joined these guys, did you see a big difference, I don't know, as far as crowd-wise or the thing that you were looking to do? I'm guessing that happened with Zoinks since you stayed with them for a very long time.
It's interesting. As far as our crowd, I remember one of the last shows we ever played in Reno before we broke up was kind of like how it started. It was, 20, 30 people there. Yeah, it was, honestly, it was a little frustrating. I mean, we had toured all over the country. We had been somewhat successful, I guess, as far as a punk band goes. And, our local shows were still kind of sparsely attended. And that was sort of a trend that always continued.
Just around the country or always local?
No, locally, sorry.
There's certain spots around the country where the local scene just never, I think sometimes they never really embraced their local band, even though that band was doing well outside of there.
Yeah, and we definitely fell into that trap, for sure.
Didn't you play, like, I mean, granted, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, and I want to get a little bit more into how you guys started touring and Doctor Strange and all that, but, I mean, didn't you have some bigger shows in the country where you'd come back and just be like, screw it, we don't care because we were actually hitting in other places?
You mean like come back to Reno and not care?
Well, I mean, because, it's frustrating as a band when you're doing it for a while and you get that taste of what a good show is like, and then you come back home and there's certain spots where you just can't, it just won't work for you. I mean, granted, it sucks even more when it's your hometown, but I mean, I don't know, like, did you have any other shows that were happening around that when you came back home and it wasn't as much of a sting when no one really showed up?
I always just was a little perplexed by it. I mean, we could go to Florida. Florida was always huge for us, and even some parts of Southern California, Casper, Wyoming, of all places. We would we'd get 300 people at a show in Casper.
Jesus Christ, that's awesome.
And then some of the, a lot of the Florida shows were incredible too. Yeah, I was just, I guess, maybe perplexed by it. It's like, why couldn't we draw 100 people easy in Florida, and then we come home and we're lucky if 20 people show up? That was just seemed like our reality and our curse.
Were there any other bands locally that were in the punk scene that were drawing more than you, and it was even more of like, what the fuck?
I don't know. I don't recall. I mean, yeah, there was a band called Fall Silent that I think was around sort of at the tail end of Zoinks, and maybe for a year or two. I think we even played with them once at a skate jam here in Reno, and they always drew well and had a big crowd. But I think they were maybe kind of straight edge, or they at least had that straight edge kind of hardcore crowd that was, I think, more devoted than the dorky pop punk kids.
So did you guys start touring before you got on Doctor Strange, or did Doctor Strange become the catalyst to make you guys tour?
I think we did one tour. It was just a West Coast tour before Doctor Strange.
And what year was that? Like 94?
Would have been 94, yeah.
What was that like? Do you remember? Did you guys ever use the dialers?
The dialers.
It's when you'd go to a payphone and it was a pre-recorded sound that made it sound like you're putting quarters in, so you could call people for free.
No, I think we had other things we did.
Like what?
I can't remember. There was like phone cards you could get.
Oh yeah, I mean that's paying for them, but
yeah, but there was ways to. I don't remember. I don't think we did dialers. I know we were doing stuff like that though. Yeah, it was interesting. We had a pretty nice tour. I mean, it was just basically up the West Coast from Reno. I think we played Chico, Seattle. I think we may have played with Sicko up in Seattle. They were always great. We played Oregon, maybe a couple more shows in California. And then I think by then we had 2 or 3 7-inches out, and then we sent those, plus we had recorded a 6-song demo that ended up being half of Bad Move Space Cadet. And we had sent that to Fat Records, Lookout, and Doctor Strange, and maybe 1 or 2 others like Epitaph or whatever. I don't know where we sent it. And just said, hey, we're this band, and I don't know if you're signing, asking people to be on your label or whatever. But Doctor Strange loved it and just wrote us back. I mean, it totally surprised me, that they would want to. And he offered to pay for the rest of the album. He says, I want to put this out. I think this is going to be big. It was our best-selling album ever. I don't know ultimately how much it sold, but I think the last I checked in the mid-2000s, it was well over 20,000 copies. So
Jesus.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, was this around the time, was this after, because it's Bill, right? Bill from Doctor Strange?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I've been trying to get him on this thing for like 3 years now.
You got to do it. He is he's a great guy. I haven't talked to him in years, but he is a great guy and just a wealth of knowledge about punk rock. I mean, just incredible.
I know. It's so hard to lock him down, and I just stay on it. And he's like, oh no, I'll talk, and I'll email him, and then like 3 months later, I'm like, hey man, we're still trying to get this to happen. But I was talking to someone recently. Oh, I was talking to someone recently. We had talked about how Doctor Strange had that face-to-face, the first face-to-face record, and then the face-to-face went to Fat. So when you guys were on Doctor Strange, was that around the time when that face-to-face album came out, or did that come out after you?
That was right before. That was like a year or so before. And that was actually, I think, why we may have approached them, is because we saw that obviously Doctor Strange is very eclectic as far as the bands that were on there. I would say when we got on there, he was doing more of the kind of pop and melodic punk. And then after we kind of broke up and did that, he was moving more toward like the really old school, more obscure kind of like British punk and things like that.
I think that's just like got to be so cool when you're trying to get on a label and they write you back and they said yeah, and you're like, holy shit, this is actually gonna happen.
Exactly. That was the response. Was like, oh my god, is this for real? Is this really happening?
Did you guys like kind of talk as a band and go, holy shit, like this is gonna happen for us? Like we're gonna be, I don't know, like we're gonna be the thing that we want to be, either huge, or I don't know what your guys' vision was.
I honestly don't recall. I knew we were obviously excited and we all agreed to do it at the time. And, we didn't have a traditional kind of label agreement. What he did was I shouldn't say that because I don't really know what a traditional label agreement was, but basically, I think what he offered us was like a lot of tour support and merchandise in favor of a reduced royalty rate. And then, back then, most punk labels, their royalties were really just copies of the CDs and LPs for you to sell. I seem to recall it was an arrangement like that.
So when you guys go out on tour, is this when you started just touring nonstop? Like, did you tour nonstop after that?
Once we got on Doctor Strange, I'm trying to recall, we definitely, that was part of the deal, was like, we want you to tour and we can help set you up with bookers and all this stuff. And so it was really cool. He hooked us up with Mandingo, and that was our first US tour, was with Mandingo, and we went across the US and all over the place through the South. And yeah, it was wild.
Were they from Chicago, that band?
No, Mandingo was from Phoenix.
I just did a podcast where I remembered seeing them in Jersey, and they were on tour with this band called Houseboy. And I just remembered that I was like, it was so obscure because I saw them one time, but I was think that the lead singer had like long hair or something. I don't know. Yeah. So I was reading through the Discogs as you and I first started talking, and I saw that. I was like, that's so weird. I literally just mentioned that band in a previous episode. Yeah, like what was, I don't know, because I was in a band and we toured like 8 times, so I know what that life is like for what we saw. And it's basically get in a van, drive really long hours, and this is when the van starts, it's like smelling okay, and then you get to the show and it's either great or it sucks, then you get back in the van and you stay at someone's place and you drive more, and then the van starts getting more funky, and then either gets a little tension in the van or people are getting along. So what was like the first couple tours, like what was your guys' experience as a band on the inside?
Well, exactly what you just said.
It seems like it's the same pattern for any band.
Yeah, one thing that's different for West Coast bands as opposed to Midwest, Southern, or East Coast bands is we have these tremendously long drives just to get to a major population center. So for us to go to Las Vegas and play was a 9-hour drive. Sacramento and the Bay Area were 2 and 4 hours, respectively. So for us to go on tour, we would go from Reno to Vegas, 9-hour drive, and then to Phoenix, which is another 5 hours. And then anything after that was basically hours long drive. Sometimes we'd have to drive 2 days before we play a show, especially like in the Midwest or heading out to the Midwest. Like for a band in Reno to head out to the Midwest, you're talking at least 3 days of solid long drives. And like just going from here to Denver is easily 2 days. But once you get past like Kansas and start heading into places like Ohio and whatnot, you can set up shows like every 2 hours away. For example, when we played New York City, the next night we were at, you mentioned Maxwell's in Hoboken. We were there. I think it was Maxwell's.
It's like the only, I believe it's the only music venue at the time in Hoboken. It's hard to explain. Like I could say it was 2 blocks from the river, or I don't know if you'd even remember that. It's
Yeah. I don't remember. I think it was Maxwell's we played. For some reason I thought it was in not in Hoboken, but somewhere else in Jersey. I don't know. I can't remember. But touring the East Coast once you got out there was great because rather than having a 10-hour drive to the next gig, you'd have a 2 or 3 or 4 hour drive, and that was just always a blessing.
Well, that's what was like leading my next question. Did you find that you guys congregated more to the East Coast because of that, and then stayed? Because you said Florida was awesome for you.
It was, yeah.
So it's like, do you think that did you focus a lot of attention on the East Coast because it was short drives, and then started to see because you kept going back there that the crowds were increasing?
No, I don't think it was because of the drives. I think it was just because Doctor Strange was really big in certain pockets of the U.S., like Chicago and Florida, parts of the East Coast. And, I think Bill did a really good thing by signing bands that were all over the country so that they could help build his base as a smaller independent label. And so he was, I think, I'm only speculating, but at least it seems like in hindsight, he was somewhat strategic about building up the Doctor Strange base around the country.
Interesting. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because then, like I want to say, I'm drawing a blank on their name, but there was a band in New Hampshire from those days, couple bands. They shared members and they were kind of a melodic punk band. I'm drawing a blank on their
I
names.
have what year? I have their Discogs open, or the Doctor
They
Strange.
would have been in the mid to late 90s, and I think they were on Doctor Strange or maybe put something out on Doctor Strange so that, it was kind of like a logical connection to just, okay, we're in New York, so now we're going to go head up to New Hampshire or whatever.
Was it Rhythm Collision?
Yeah, no, they were Southern California.
Oh, that's right. Schleprock, Bull Weevils, Sinkhole, Brown Lobster Tank.
Was it Sinkhole?
And Sinkhole was around, let's see. We don't have to stay on this either.
Yeah, they were yep, that was them. Melodic punk from the New Hampshire area. And so, yeah, he would, I seem to recall they were on Doctor Strange, or maybe he had a 7-inch or something. So, we were able to hook up with them. And then, when they came into Reno, they played a show. I think it was Sinkhole or maybe the other band that they were associated with. I'm kind of drawing a blank on their name too, but yeah. I mean, it was cool. He had a lot of, Bill had a lot of really great connections around the country, and he was able to leverage that for the benefit of the bands. I thought it was a really kind of cool approach. It was like very almost like family oriented in a way.
This is a really obscure question, and the only reason it just popped in my brain just because I remember being in a van and stuff. I remember that when we would be on the road, we'd be listening to CDs, and there was a lot of bands in 98, 99 that were punk bands, emo bands, that genre started to explode. So we had this big selection of stuff to listen to, and I'm just imagining in 95 there wasn't as many bands from then, but we'd listen to them and just because we loved them, or we'd listen to them and be like, I really want to be as big as this band. Do you remember, I don't know if you can answer this, but do you remember being in the van and just putting certain things on rotation because you were like, this was kind of an inspiration for us as a band?
Yeah. And frankly, we were really influenced. I mean, I think we tried to not be influenced, but we were really influenced by a lot of what was going on at Gilman Street in the East Bay. I personally used to go to shows at Gilman all the time in the early 90s just to see various bands, whether they were loud, noisy hardcore bands or pop punk bands, or, there was a band in between Rancid and Op Ivy called Generator. It was the two main guys from both those bands, and it was sort of their in-between band. I don't even know if they ever recorded anything, but it was very much like Rancid ended up being. And then, of course, I saw Rancid and NoFX at Gilman Street, Green Day 2 or 3 times, saw Fugazi down there. So, yeah, we were just really influenced, I think, by a lot of the more known punk stuff that was happening on the East Coast and the East Bay area.
So you said that Bad Space Cadet sold a lot of copies in total. You said possibly 20,000, 30,000?
Oh, I'm sure it's way above that now. Of course, that came out before the whole Napster thing. And so all of our stuff, last I looked, I mean, it's all over YouTube. And, I haven't seen any royalties from that in decades, probably 2 decades at least. Yeah, I don't really know what the figures were, but I just remember that all that shit was pirated, during the Napster era. From what I gather, probably decimated any potential royalties we would have gotten.
Yeah, I definitely want to tap into because I talked to that with a lot of bands who went over that hump from the 90s into 2000s. And because everyone saw potentially that happening where they're like, where's, if they were making any kind of money or even a little bit, they're like, where the hell is that going? And how does everyone know the words to our songs when we're showing up? So I don't know, because around that time, when you guys get on Doctor Strange, that was the sweet spot for that label. I felt that's when it was pretty popular, where that was a name that we would see that with the Fat Records and the Epitaphs and the Hopeless Records, and who else was coming around?
Lookout.
Lookout too. I feel like Doctor Strange was very well up in that. So did you find when you guys were going around that was, I don't know, was that giving you a boost and getting you recognition because of being on that label?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That definitely propelled us from being a Reno band to a national and even an international band. There's no doubt about that.
Do you remember any shows back then where you played them and people just went apeshit for you guys?
Yeah, I think like the first time we went to like Texas and Florida and places like that, and then I think I mentioned Wyoming. Yeah, that was wild. We're like, whoa, what is happening? And it was really because Doctor Strange, and also because Doctor Strange was distributed by Mortem, which was the distributor for all of the like the Maximum Rock and Roll, Lookout Records. So really a lot of that stuff was riding on the coattails of Green Day, Operation Ivy, exploding on Lookout and being distributed by Mortem. So like anything on Mortem from there was like having doors opened for it. Any band or any label that was being distributed by Mortem, like people were like, holy shit, now we can sell in the millions.
Wow. Did you guys want to sell in the millions?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, obviously, it would have been nice to be like Fugazi and pre-sell 60,000, 100,000 CDs before it even comes out. That would have been really nice. I think we kind of caught on, maybe we didn't talk about it so much, but I think we caught on that was probably not going to be us.
What were you guys like live? So anyone who never got to see you guys, like what was your live show like?
I don't know.
Well, some bands like
I mean, there's tons of videos out on YouTube still, I think, that you can find.
Yeah, I actually found your YouTube channel that I think it's doing.
Is it Zoinks NV or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to log into that. I should probably look into that one of these days. Because that's a channel I set up, I think, back in 2004.
I was catching that because its subscription is to your personal YouTube.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, we're doing like you're doing like drum kind of reviews a little bit.
Yep. I haven't been on that account either in a long time.
What were you guys like in just behind? I don't know, what was your relationship like as a band, like personally? Did you guys get along? Did you guys have a little friction?
I think as time went on, we had friction. The circumstances leading to Zach leaving the band were, I guess for lack of a better term, sort of controversial.
Yeah, because he went to Screeching Weasel, right?
No, what had happened, and I would encourage you to get him on too to give his perspective, because we all have different recollections of how things happened and what happened and all that. So definitely this is my recollection, which is admittedly probably not very accurate. But what I seem to recall was he had gotten picked up by Squirt Gun to do vocals and guitar with them. He had gone out on tour with them, and we were starting to get messages from people saying, "Oh, I heard you guys are breaking up." And we're like, "What?" And the three of us, Rob, Arnie, and I, while Zach was out on tour for a few weeks, had been writing new material for what was going to become Well and Good. So we just kept writing. And then when he came back, he's like, "Well, I'm leaving the band." And so we were just like, okay, well, we're going to, we wrote all these songs while you were gone, so we're just going to keep playing them. And we did that. We toured the U.S. as a 3-piece in 97, and then went to Europe, I believe in June of 98. And then we broke up after that.
Okay, because I was wondering when I was looking at the photos, you guys were a 4-piece and then you're a 3-piece. So I was like, so what happened here?
Yeah, so we were a 3-piece, then a 4-piece, and then a 3-piece. Yeah, what had happened is we'd gone out on tour with Mandingo as a 3-piece, and then I think we had at some point connected with this band Underhand that was from Northern California, and that's the band that Arnie Chirkos was in. And so we'd become friends with them, and Zach had the idea to bring in a second guitarist who could also sing. We connected with Arnie and, invited him to be a part of Zoinks, and he moved here from Northern California. We were a 4-piece, would have been our 96 tour. And then, so that, yeah, I guess we were a 4-piece for maybe a year and a half.
Okay.
And then, Zach ended up leaving to, do whatever with like Squirt Gun and all that.
So who's Colin?
Oh, he was the original drummer.
Oh, okay. Because I'm just looking at. All right, there we go. I had all the names from the Discog. Yeah, he was crossed out on Discog, so I was like, wonder why that was like that. So he was the one who was there for like 6 months or whatever before you joined.
Yeah, that's to the best of my knowledge, yes.
So when Zach leaves the band, you guys you put out Well and Good after that?
Correct. Yeah, like I said, Zach had gone out, and then we had been getting hints that he Well, what we were being told is that he was telling people he was breaking up the band. When he came back, he said, "No, I'm just quitting the band." Frankly, I'm not clear as to why in hindsight. I'm sure he probably told us at the time, but so we had still had a deal with Doctor Strange, I think, to fulfill a contract. I seem to recall we had to do a second or third release, and we did. We actually recorded that in the Bay Area with Kevin Army, and
Wow.
yeah, and so we recorded that. I'm guessing that would have been in maybe the spring of '97, and then when that came out, we went on tour as a three-piece to support Well and Good, and also did Europe. And I do recall that Europe was still part of the deal with Doctor Strange. He was still going to pay for us to go to Europe, basically.
A couple things there, because I'm looking at the releases on Spotify right now, and the artwork is you guys are the cover for Well and Good as a three-piece. Was there like a reason? Because it's like you went from a four-piece to a three-piece. Was there kind of like a reason that you put a picture of the three of you on there after losing a fourth member?
That's a good question. I don't recall why we did that. I know we hired a really good photographer that we really liked here in the Reno area, who had been doing skate and punk and snowboard photography for many, many years. And he had come over to shoot our artwork for the album. And I think we just sort of decided to use that.
Hmm. It's just like one of those things. I was like, I wonder if that was kind of like I mean, granted, this is so many years later, and I'm not just trying to think of it, but I just know, like, for me, I remember me being younger, being like, oh, I'm gonna give it back to someone in some subtle way, maybe.
Maybe. Very, very, very possible.
Going from a three-piece to a four-piece, you see the fullness that it gives you, and then to lose that other guitar and shrink down to a three-piece, did you guys feel like a little deflated in your live sound because of that?
No, I'll be honest with you. There are different virtues for being a three-piece band versus a four-piece. Of course, with a four-piece, assuming it's two guitars, you just get that much beefier guitar sound, that sort of stereo image type sound. But I'll be honest with you, a part of me really likes three-piece bands because it's less people to deal with, less logistics. Once you mic everything up, nobody really notices that you're not a four-piece. Yeah, I think there's virtues either way, frankly.
How many tours did you guys do after he left the band?
I think it was just that one in the U.S. and then the European one in '98.
So 98 was the final tour?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But okay, so I also read that you guys played with Green Day in Hawaii in front of 6,000 people.
Yeah, that was in '96. So that was a U.S. tour, I think, that we did after the Mandingo one. I want to say we toured the U.S. about 4 times, but they might have been smaller and shorter. I don't recall. I'd have to go. I'm sure I have files somewhere that would tell us that. But yeah, that was sort of our big solo tour. I want to say was the '96 one.
So you basically just flew down to Hawaii for one show.
Correct. Two shows.
Two shows.
Yeah.
Both with Green Day, or one was
No, we did one at the college or the university there with the band Grapefruit, who we had kind of become friends with, and they were just awesome guys and fun band, and they connected us with the guy from Golden Voice who books. I think he still books a lot of the shows in Hawaii. He put the Green Day thing together, and we were like, heck yeah, we're going to play that.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah, that was the biggest show I've ever played and probably will ever play.
What was that like, just to see that many people?
Well, there's videos on YouTube, and I will say that our set was normally about 20 minutes, and we were so anxious and amped up that we did our whole set in like 24 minutes. The songs were way too fast, and of course that's usually the drummer's fault. So
Oh my, yeah, that's true.
yeah. So that I mean, it was wild. And then of course watching Green Day and just the whole scene of like being backstage, and I mean, it was just nuts. I mean, it was really cool. I'm very glad to have experienced it. But I will tell you, in hindsight, I'm glad we didn't really make it big. I don't know if I would really like that lifestyle, to be honest with you.
Why? What wouldn't you like about it?
Oh, I don't know. It's just, I've got to go backstage at various shows over the years with different bands, and it's so rigid. I don't know if rigid is the right word, but it's such a weird scene. I don't know. I just like being a regular dude in Reno,
Yeah, totally.
I have no delusions of grandeur at age 50, almost 52 now. And I don't know. I think there's a virtue in just kind of being an ordinary person. And I don't know if I would like the lifestyle where you have to, have a security guard follow you around all the time and that kind of thing. I couldn't hang with that.
Yeah, I just did an interview that launches tomorrow, and we talk about that. And because he's done a bunch of bands, and he's like, some people just want to just kind of not be that big band and just not be like so in the spotlight and have just a chill life. And I was like, yeah, I dig that. I'm a big fan of that. When I was younger, I wanted to have all the glitz and glam and stuff. And as I get older, I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't really need that shit.
Yeah. It's like I said, I've been around that a little bit, and it doesn't do much for me, frankly.
Do you have like a song that was pretty like your most requested song at live shows?
I don't recall. Definitely Bad Moose Space Cadet, our first LP, was our most popular by far of anything that we did. Yeah, it was usually stuff off of that. So no, I don't recall anything in particular.
Yeah, it's kind of like a random question to ask because some people are like, we didn't really have people say it, but there was a song that sometimes there was just a song as a band you just loved to play as a whole, and the crowd would just get a little juiced up by it. But it's kind of hard to remember from that, like 25 years ago, which one that was. So how do you guys officially end?
Well, so we came back from Europe, and from what I recall at the time, the idea was we were all going to move to Portland, Oregon, after we got back from Europe. And we thought we were going to make more money. At least this is my recollection. We thought we were going to make more money in Europe than we actually did. And I came back basically broke. And I paid off my rent from the place where I was staying, and then ended up essentially being homeless, kind of couch surfing for an entire summer while I had to find kind of a menial job just to get by. So I didn't have the finances to move to Portland. Arnie did move, and he's been in Oregon ever since, various places. Rob did move. He ended up coming back, I want to say maybe 8 months later, or maybe a year later. They didn't last, him and his girlfriend, now wife, girlfriend at the time, but now his wife. They didn't end up staying there for too long. And, in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't go, because I really don't like Portland weather.
So when Napster comes out and you start to see the scene change, was there another kind of another thing that you saw as the scene started to change where you were like, "Oh, I'm glad we're not a part of that shit."
In '98, I had turned 28. I'd been out of college for 4 years and not really had a decent job in that whole time. I think for me, I was just tired of being broke. It would have been nice to make money off of music and the whole DIY thing. But I think for me, it was just not practical. I was also running my label at the time and ended up going bankrupt because what happened was, with Napster and all of that, a lot of my bigger distributors ended up going bankrupt. And so basically, like within about a 2-year period, there was just no way for me to pay my bills because other people weren't paying their bills. And so that was a really difficult time for me financially.
So that was Second Guess Records?
Correct, yeah.
Actually, I knew the guys from John Cougar Concentration Camp.
Oh, they're great, yeah.
Was Mike the drummer in the band at that time?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I just remember. Oh, and you put out the My Pel Trigger CD.
I did, yeah. And I think I was supposed to do some more stuff with them, but that was like right when the whole bankruptcy thing was happening. So, yeah, frankly, the Napster thing really, really hurt a lot of us. And it really took something that was kind of a hobby business and made it something completely not viable. Yeah, that was a weird thing. And for me at the time, it was very stressful and, heart-wrenching, but it was also just the way the world was moving. So it happened.
I've talked to different labels and they all have a different perspective on that. And some of them are like, yeah, it was awful. And some of them were like, it actually kind of worked in our favor because a band would show up and kids would buy more merch, which was beneficial to the band. And it's weird to just hear the back and forth, but I'm guessing it might just be due to the size of a label. And, if you're a smaller label and everyone's downloading your shit, then you're just like, I just burned all this money to record this and have a stack of CDs now that aren't moving.
Yeah, I remember everyone, and myself included, were thinking that Lars Ulrich from Metallica was being a D-bag for going after Napster. But in hindsight, I'm like, the copyright thing is pretty serious. And, I currently run a news website out of Reno, and our stuff gets pirated a lot. And it's very frustrating because I will pay somebody, let's just say, I don't know, $50, $100 to write a few stories. And then if somebody just comes along and copies it and republishes it, that's money out of my pocket, essentially. And it's not fair to them, the freelancer. It's not fair to me. So, as I've gotten older, I kind of realized, well, I think maybe Lars was right about that.
Someone just said that the other day, and it's like, as everyone
Really?
gets old, oh yeah, something in like this pop punk group I'm in or somewhere, someone's like, I think he was pretty much hit the nail on the head when he was trying to sue these guys. And then I feel like a lot of people now who were too cool back then are like, yeah, we were wrong. He was actually right.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's your intellectual
it's your
property,
wallet too. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean that for some people translates into a livelihood. For somebody to just come along and take that and spread it out all over the place, it's like, I mean, they're literally stealing from you. And just because it's not a tangible piece of work, just because it's an internet-based, it's a file as opposed to a piece of art that you're selling on the sidewalk or whatever.
Yeah.
It's offensive, frankly. I mean, if you've ever had that happen to you, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Somebody just came along and took this. Oh, it's punk rock, man. Well, no, it's not. You're stealing. You're stealing from somebody who's trying to put something out in the universe and not lose their ass doing it in the process.
There's a band called Broken, the worldwide EP, and it says it was released in 2016 on your label.
Broken?
Yeah, it might just be it might just be caught up in the algorithm mistakenly and thrown on your page.
Never heard of it.
Interesting.
And I don't even know what page you're talking about.
Your Discogs, Second Guess Records Discogs.
Discogs?
Yeah.
Interesting. No, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you got it has your full catalog, I believe. It's got the 3 Zoinks releases, Invalids, John Cougar Concentration Camp, Narcissist Freds, John Cougar Concentration Camp, Invalids, Grapefruit, My Pal Trigger, and then in the middle of that, this band called Broken is on there.
Let me pull it up.
Worldwide.
Oh, there's a label called Second Guess.
Oh, it might be
Melbourne, Australia. Maybe that's it.
Oh, that's probably them. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like another. Sorry, I just pulled it up too.
No, totally. Yeah, Australian hardcore band. Yeah, they're like a newer band on that. Interesting.
Yeah, good for them. Yeah, I mean they can have the name. I mean I don't need it.
Maybe that's how you make your money. Go after it.
No, like I said, that whole thing went bankrupt back in would have been 99. Oh yeah, though I do have a Discogs page. Imagine that.
I know. It's just any website out there. It just sucks in all data and puts it up, and then plus when people list their records, they put all the information on there, so it goes to some place. I don't know how the actual records page or band page gets made. Yeah, I just learned about Discogs because of this podcast, because I was just trying to find information on anyone that I'm interviewing, and this has always come up. I didn't realize it's still a functioning website.
Yeah, no, Discogs great. I set up an account to sell all my vinyl a few years ago, and it's been fantastic.
Yeah, I like the fact too that it shows you on the app the range of money you can make with your collection. Yeah. It's like someone showed me that.
Well, now I'm going to start moving my old CDs, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, someone showed me the other day that the range was between $4,000 to $12,000 of what they can make on Discogs. I was like, holy shit! I'm gonna get my records out there.
Yeah, I piecemealed out a lot of my old vinyl out on there, and over the years I probably easily made $500,000.
$500,000.
No, sorry, 500 or to 1,000. Sorry, not 500,000. Boy, I'd have a whole different line of work.
I was like, I'm pretty sure I heard that wrong, and I was definitely right. Cool, man. Well, so before I ask you questions, is there a story you've always wanted to tell that you've never told in another interview that you'd like to tell now?
You mean about Zoinks?
Yeah, it could be like a tour story, something funny, just whatever. You're like, oh, this is a random thing that I've never told before.
Touring Europe with the band Whatever from Ohio was a hoot. Those guys were funny. But we were, I think, about 5 weeks in the same van with them.
God.
It got a little tense at times. I just remember the funny story about them is that we all got per diem, which is like maybe $10 a day to get lunch or whatever. I seem to recall that their drummer kind of withheld all the per diem, so they were just like scraping and borrowing their food the whole tour.
Oh my God.
So because you would get fed at all the places that you played in Europe, usually, there would be like a meal or, either before the show or after. And I just remember that the drummer wasn't really paying them their per diem.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I don't remember why, but I can almost guarantee they probably came back with more money in their pockets than I did.
Oh my God. Wait, so he wouldn't do the per diem because he was saving the money for them for the end of the tour?
I guess, yeah.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that seems very responsible-ish, even though everyone was starved.
Yeah, but I just remember like we'd go get like lunch and they'd go buy a loaf of bread and mustard.
Oh my God. And they come home,
And
they're
I
like,
just
we're
thought that was
rich.
the funniest thing. But then in hindsight, like I came back broke and homeless, so I don't know. Maybe the joke's on me.
Yeah, and they had rent for like 3 months.
Yeah, I think they broke up after that tour too. So you'd have to go track those guys down and find out.
Yeah, 5 weeks, that's a long ass tour, especially when you have that many people in one van. That's murder.
Yeah, so there was, me, Arnie, and Rob, and then the three guys in Whatever. Plus, I think they had a roadie who we just kind of, he helped us, move all the gear, and then we had a driver. So what is that? 8 people, 9 people, 8 people in a sort of one of those cargo vans. And
Oh my God.
yeah, we went all over Europe, into even Eastern Germany at the time, which was pretty wild too.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Well, cool, dude. So I'll let you go after these 2 questions. So before I ask the last one, what would you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend, it could be about both.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm still playing music. I still take drum lessons with a guy out of New York City. We do it on Skype, and I don't know if I have any project I want to plug. I mean, I'm currently playing in a couple different bands. One's called Irreplaceable Beans, which is, you may know Pierre, who's the drummer for Screeching Weasel. This is a project he put together during the pandemic, and it was basically all him. He played the drums, kind of wrote the songs and the lyrics and sings, and then he brought in a guy to play the guitar parts. Then he decided, it was about a year ago, I guess, to actually form a band and do it. So we just finished playing. I think we've played maybe about 5 shows since maybe February. We just actually opened for Agent Orange about a week and a half ago here in Reno. So the band's called Irreplaceable Beans. You can find them on Spotify and Apple and all that stuff. So give it a listen. I don't play drums on the recording, but I do the live drumming. That's been a fun project. And when he sent me the material he recorded 3, 4 song EPs, I want to say, or maybe 6 song EPs. I was like, holy crap, this is really good, Pierre. When did you start singing and writing songs? And so, yeah, I'm very proud to be a part of that project. So,
awesome. How'd you like playing live again?
Well, I've been playing live. I've been in cover bands and various punk bands and doing all sorts of musical projects over the last few decades. And except for a period of the early 2000s, I almost gave up playing. In fact, I did. When my wife and I moved into a new house, there was a room off the side of the garage, and I remember moving my drums in there and then just not even going in there for like 3 months. I almost gave up playing, frankly. But then, Zoinks got back together to do a few shows, and then, I've just been playing in various bands ever since.
Actually, before I was dive in that really just super quickly. When was the reunion show you guys played or shows?
I think we played 2 or maybe about 3 or 4 back in 04, 05, maybe 06.
Oh, so that was pretty close to the time that you broke up. Closer than, 2015.
5 years after the fact, 5 or 6 years after.
Oh, shit. So when you did that, did Zach come back and play, or was it just you guys keep a 3-piece?
Yeah, we did. It was actually Rob didn't do it. We brought in a guy, Shane, who's actually I playing Irreplaceable Beans with, came in and played bass. It was me, Zach, Arnie, and Shane. Yeah, we actually did I don't know if they still do it, but there was a pop punk festival out of Baltimore. We played that. I want to say in '04, '05.
I don't know what that was.
Oh, I forget the name of that. It was not a good show.
Oh, really?
Good. No, it was terrible.
Oh, why?
Oh, I don't remember. It was just we didn't play well and the sound wasn't good. I had to play somebody else's kit, which I hate doing, and
Yeah.
it just yeah, it was just all out of sorts. It just wasn't very good.
Well, that sucks.
Yeah, but that's fine. I don't think we'll ever play again. We've been offered to, and I'm not into it. I've got other things going on.
Yeah, I feel like you guys would be a good fest band.
Yeah, I don't want to do like the Jawbreaker thing though. I mean, I don't know, but who knows? Never say never, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, fest is usually just a one-off at one point during the weekend between Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and it's pretty cool. I don't know if you've ever been to fest, but it's pretty dope.
No, but I know about it, and that's in Gainesville, right?
Yeah, and I think Agent Orange played last year. I think so. But yeah, I went there last year. It was cool. It's a very cool vibe and super positive, like, energy going around and little one-offs where, someone will play a show and they'll go do a little acoustic set, some small bar and stuff. It's pretty dope.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I would much rather do something like that than like South by Southwest in Austin.
Yeah, it's like a big festival, but it's all clubs around town, and there's one giant stage in the center and some weird soccer AstroTurf field thing. But I feel like, yeah, that would be more your guys' vibe. Well, cool, man. All right, so last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
Um, Probably the DIY ethic. I think that's probably always going to stick with me. I mean, even though I'm a older privileged white male, I didn't grow up with I mean, I had a lot of support, with family and friends, but business wise, I don't get a lot of breaks, so I end up kind of doing my own thing in the way that I want to. And I think that's always stuck with me from my high school and punk rock days, is like start your own business, become an entrepreneur or whatever the case is, do your own music, book your own shows. I don't do all those things anymore, but definitely that idea of, to me, the best kind of show is when somebody gets up there, just kicks major ass, performs their ass off, people love them, and then they're in the crowd right after their set, rocking out to the next band.